All right, welcome officially, everybody, to Life of a Corporate Showgirl. I'm Randi Braun, and I am so excited to spend the next hour with you. Really just talking about all of these leadership lessons that we can learn from Taylor Swift, inspired, of course, by the release of her new album, The Life of a Showgirl. I think that there is so much that Taylor Swift teaches us on a regular basis, but especially in this new era, about resilience, about leadership, and about taking the spotlight rather, in our own lives and careers. There's so much to unpack, and we're going to do it together on playing the long game in your goals, staying grounded when the haters come for you, cultivating confidence as an inside job, thinking about how we balance productivity and creativity. I'm really just thinking about how we can unpack some of the tools that she has mastered to really thrive in our own arenas, even if we never sell one out. So I see some familiar faces here, and I'd love for you to just throw in the chat, where are you joining us from today? One of the things I really want to just say off the bat is that this is meant to be an interactive conversation. So I want to hear from you in the chat. I want to hear from you in the Q&A. And in that spirit of interactivity, I know many of you have come to my leadership lessons from Taylor Swift webinar before. As I mentioned, when we put this one out there, this is actually a very different format. I'm going to be sitting down with a dear friend of mine, Suzanne Struglinski, in just a few minutes. And we decided to do this as a little bit more of a fireside chat today. I'll formally introduce Suzanne in a minute, but she is a PR expert. There's so much that Suzanne has a great perspective on the branding and the marketing that we can use in our lives as kind of corporate showgirls. So before we dive into that conversation, let's do a quick round of introductions from all of you. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. What's your favorite song from this album? So I'm just catching up here on where people are joining from. Oh my God, from like every time zone in the United States of America. I love that. Okay, New Jersey, Detroit, Bethesda, Philly, DC, Orlando, Scottsdale, North Carolina, New York City, Louisville, Buffalo. Oh, we have some Canadians here. Hi, Toronto. Melanie says sunny California. Okay, I'll give that to you. I just broke out my fall gear for the first time, and I have really mixed emotions about it, Melanie. San Antonio. Oh my God, Alberta. I got all the Canadians in the house. I'm dying to hear. Okay, people's favorite songs: Mix Honey, Opalite, Wood, Sarah. Me too. Oh, and someone coming dialed in from China. Thank you for joining. Father figure. There's so much great music on this album. There are so many great things to learn from Taylor Swift. So without any further ado, let's just jump into our conversation, and let me take a minute to formally introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. For those of you who were forwarded this link on the group text, on your Slack, on your email this morning being like, you have to come to this thing. It's so nice to meet you. I'm Randi Braun. I'm joining from my home office here in Washington, D.C. I am an author, and I run a women's leadership coaching firm called Something Major. And that is all a very, very formal way of saying I spend my time doing three things when I'm not just like constantly listening to Taylor Swift on repeat. Number one is I'm a coach. I coach women to help them thrive at work and crush it at work without feeling crushed in the process. The second is I do a ton of speaking. So think every conference you've ever been to, your team offsite, your ERG, I help my clients make meetings awesome so that people fall in love with the contents of the meeting, not the contents of their phone. And thirdly, most importantly, pertinent to this conversation, is I spend my time doing convenings, bringing women together, whether it's at a retreat I'm running, like the one I'm running in February in Mexico City, or just an hour here on Zoom, because I believe in my heart of hearts that we need to thrive as a pack. And when I think about thriving as a pack, thriving about my pack, it was so easy for me to decide who I wanted to reach out to have this conversation today. My dear friend, Suzanne Struglinski. Suzanne, are you still here? Suzanne, here she is, stepping into the spotlight.
I had to take myself off mute, but I'm here, and I'm so thrilled to be here, Randi. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. And, I couldn't think of anyone who's a better fit for this conversation, because Suzanne, this audience is going to learn very quickly that you definitely know a thing or two about the spotlight and about storytelling. Will you indulge me in reading your formal bio?
Oh my goodness, sure. It's so hard to talk
Okay.
about yourself, but that is something that Randy definitely encourages everybody to just kind of own it. So, I'm a former reporter, but I specialize in PR and media relations, event planning, and what I'm really excited to talk about today is branding. Just you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't want to go through my entire resume, but I'm really excited to be here and kind of leverage this great moment. In PR we call this newsjacking, where you seize a really great moment and kind of take advantage of what's going on right now. So when Randy texted, hey, like, you want to talk about Taylor Swift and leadership and like just the branding that she brings, it was a no-brainer to say sign me up, let's go. And I'm thrilled to hear from so many people uh, on the chat.
And I think that's also just like kind of part of like the power and the music and the leadership inspiration of Taylor Swift is like there's something just inherent about this power of connection. Like, literally this event today was born out of like taking our text chain, being like, you know what, we just gotta like throw some mics on this. And Suzanne, I'm also just gonna fill in a few dots for the audience who doesn't know you. The best thing to know about Suzanne is that she is a person who gets things done. So Suzanne is kind of like a PR unicorn because she started as a journalist before turning into a public relations powerhouse. And she has really built her career on doing lots of great, I think, very a la Taylor Swift things, cultivating relationships, telling great stories, and obviously getting major projects across the finish line. Suzanne just came back from teaching graduate students at Tsinghua University in Beijing. And we're so glad to have her home in Washington, D.C. And she just brings like such a rare blend of what I think of as like newsroom savvy, global perspective, and unstoppable follow through to everything she does. Suzanne, before we jump in today into like the lessons from Taylor Swift, do you have a favorite song from this album?
So, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I prepared talking points because there are like kind of three, right? So I love Canceled because I'm a Reputation girly. I love Angry Moody, Taylor Swift, like Swift. You can almost like feel the black eyeliner like coming through the song when you listen to it. As a word person, I love Actually Romantic because like the sass and the sarcasm is just like off the charts. And even in the way Taylor described it, like, oh, me, you're thinking about me. It was, we all have a person like that in our life. It was just very good. And then finally, Wood, because, it's about superstitions or other things, and we'll just leave it at that. But I like Grown Up and Love, Mary Taylor. Like, congratulations, girl. Like, you go on with that, and we'll just let that, we'll let all the commentary about Wood just stay where it is. But those were my top three.
I mean, I might want to unpack it later. I'm just like putting that out there. But okay. Okay, so some overlap. I have a few favorites as well. Wood is like was my immediate favorite as I listened to the album the first time, just because I think it's such a bop. And it could be about anything. I think it is such a bop. And my only complaint when this album came out on Friday was this is 100% my favorite song on the album and 100% the only album I cannot the only song on the album I cannot play for my 9-year-old, 7-year-old, and 1-year-old. I mean, like the 1-year-old, whatever. But like, I definitely cannot play it around my 9 and 7-year-old. So it's my only complaints about the album. And I love Wishlist, right? I just like, to me, as like a 1989 girly, I just kind of saw it as like this call and response to like some moments that specifically have to do around like style and bad romantics. And then really for me, like Life of a Showgirl, I mean, I was listening to this album for the first time. I flew up to New York to visit my parents, and we're sitting in bumper to bumper traffic in Queens. And I'm just like crying, Suzanne, because Life of a Showgirl just hit me so hard. And it is what inspired me to put together, some of you subscribe to my newsletter know I popped up a whole newsletter on this on Monday about this idea of a life of a corporate showgirl. As someone who spends quite a bit of time flying around the country and actually performing on stages, as I listened to the lyrics, it was just so deep for me in that sometimes there's a glamour that people feel like they see through social media. And there's definitely moments of drinking champagne in a bathrobe, like from the photo shoot and the videos at 1:00 in the morning. But there's also kind of a dark side in being the talent. And I think that that's just such a resonant message for everyone, because the truth is, no matter what we do, whether you stand on keynote stages or Suzanne, you're always behind the curtains, making sure the spotlight is on your clients in the right way, or you're an entrepreneur, or you run a nonprofit, there's a performance to our work. And I just love that she's calling out the performance. I do believe there's this aspect that we're all a corporate showgirl. Suzanne, it looks like you were about to jump in. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say, so on Friday when the album came out, I'm listening to it on the train going to a PR, a big women in PR event, and I was helping set up the step and repeat. And if you've never set up a step and repeat, it is not easy. And another colleague and I are like, hoisting up this fabric and like putting up this pipe. And all I could think about in my head, yep, this is the life of a showgirl. Like, it's here we are. Like this is the real portion of this. And I love kind of that unveiling or like behind the curtain look at, yes, it does look great. And yes, I'm a billionaire, but like this takes work and this takes practice. And Randy, you said it so right. You're on the plane all the time. And like, yes, you're on stage and you get to do cool things and you get to meet cool people. But like it's a grind. And like we love it and we wouldn't have it any other way, but it's literally a line in the song. Like this is what it is. This is what I signed up for. So it's kind of important to remember as we're building businesses and building brands, like this is kind of what comes with the territory. There's reward, but there's a lot of work that goes into those projects.
It's so true. And I'd also love to hear from any of you in the chat if you want to share, like what to you feels like that life of a showgirl moment. Like for me, it's like when I'm stuck at the airport and my flight's gotten delayed like 5 times and then it's gotten canceled. But this has happened to me before, but I'm like contractually obligated to be in that city the next day. And it's not because I wasn't a planner. It's because like the life of this showgirl sometimes has 3 events in 3 days in 3 different cities. And the lengths I will run to get from, in this case, this one time from Toronto to Baltimore to DC to New York City in 24 hours just to make all my connections. So basically like route around weather, right? And I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Like maybe there's a glamorous moment when you are on a panel, but it's like the talking points before that. And so we'd love to hear that. And Suzanne, while we wait to hear from that, because I don't know if people are just being shy, but like in all the group texts I'm a part of, every single woman I know who's career oriented has been like, yes, there's a part of my life that's complete showgirl. And then there's a part of my life that is like total life of a showgirl. So Suzanne, I know we have some folks here before who have been to my leadership lessons from Taylor Swift, and we've talked about goals. Spoiler, we're going to talk more about goals today. We're going to talk about the haters. Spoiler, we're going to talk more about dealing with tough stakeholders today. But while we have you, you're the mastermind. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, this was like something you and I were texting about a lot last week. Like, what are the PR gems that you would call out about how Taylor released this, the hype she built around it? Like, what stood out for you? And help me like connect the dots on how the women joining here today can use those same tools to build their brands.
Sure, absolutely. So there were like three main takeaways from like kind of the rollout and just everything, since she announced the album in August till now. Kind of one, who are your Swifties, right? Who are your audience? Really knowing your audience. Two, wear the same costume, create content and repurpose it. And three, who are your Eras Tour dancers? Who's on the team and where do you know you need the most help? So just breaking that down really quick, knowing your audience. Taylor announced this album in August. Little did we know she was going to get proposed to like that afternoon. But Swifties wanted to know what was going on with her and Travis. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, releasing it on Travis Kelce's podcast wouldn't have even been an idea, let alone a strategy, right? So she was very forthcoming. It really put them out as a couple, but it built up anticipation, right? Between August and October, we wanted to know everything about that, what the songs were going to be. There were people like making up lyrics to what they thought things were going to be just based on what the titles were, right? So she used the podcast because she knew people were going there. So as you're thinking about, your how can I be Taylor Swift? Who are my Swifties, right? Who are your Swifties? Who are you trying to reach? How do they get that information? If you're trying to sell a product to working moms, that's a different audience than trying to influence lawmakers on Capitol Hill. And that's a different different audience than trying to sell someone a house. So where are people meeting online? Where are they meeting in real life? And just kind of what's going to resonate the most with your audience. So who are your Swifties? Now, I wish I had legions of adoring fans all along the world, all across the world. I might have a few in China still. So hello, ni hao to whoever's on the call from China. But who are you trying to reach, whether with your business goals or your personal goals? So who are your Swifties was the first one.
Yeah, I think that's such an important lesson. One of the big questions I hear from women a lot in the coaching work I do is like, how can I build my personal brand? Like everyone knows they should be building their brand. And I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Like if you have any questions about brand building or throw it in the Q&A. But this is something that comes up a lot. Like whenever someone reaches out to me for coaching, like oftentimes they're like, and one of my goals is building my brand. Or people are shy about it, or they're more naturally introverted. And I think so much of your brand building is about also connecting the dots about where people are. And I'll just give you a personal experience. When I was on the book tour for my first book, Something Major, the new playbook for women at work, and I say first book because I'm working on a second book. When I was on the book tour for the first book, my publicist gave me such a hard time about how low my Instagram follower count. And I was like, okay, cool. I can either spend all my time and energy trying to build up my Instagram, my audience on Instagram, or I can cultivate my audience on LinkedIn. And in my head, Suzanne, like my audience was like, hey, where do people who are having serious, thoughtful conversations about work, where are they hanging out? They're mostly hanging out on LinkedIn. Now, there is good content on Instagram and TikTok for work, but at least the way like my Instagram feed is like my algo works is like mostly like work memes. And if you follow me on Instagram, I'm Something Major Coaching, you will see every single day I'm posting in my stories my favorite memes. But, like that was not where my audience hung out. And so I think that's like the first thing that I would point out to our audience is like if you are trying to build your brand, like really understand where your people hang out. Like, are you talking to people on Instagram? Are you talking to people on TikTok? Are you talking to people long form? Like you want to be like working on some kind of like blog, Substack, something like that? Or are you like going to be a TikTok person? And I think it's okay to experiment. But I think knowing where your audience is really important. And Suzanne, the other that I would connect there too is I think sometimes we underestimate the power of internal brand building. Like it's not just what you're saying on Instagram or LinkedIn to build your brand. Like how are you interacting with people in your emails? Are you constantly throwing in exclamation points and smiley face emojis to make sure you're coming across as warm and friendly? Okay, like that's probably not coming across as warm and friendly. Like it's probably coming across as like just desperation of like me. And so I always say, Suzanne, I'd be curious on your perspective about this too. Like your brand isn't what you think about you. It's what other people think about you. And, Suzanne, if I could just say one more thing about Taylor, the first time I saw the Eras movie tour, whatever the movie of the Eras tour, it was like Thanksgiving of the year it came out. And I brought my grandfather's girlfriend, who's like 80. She was like, I'd never heard a Taylor Swift song, didn't know anything about Taylor Swift, but Suzanne, she was a licensed practicing PhD clinical psychologist. And the first thing that she turned to me and said when that was over is, wow, she is so great at building authenticity and connection with her audience. Like she could just see that from the psychologist point of view. So let me just pause there and see your thoughts to all of that.
No, I think what's interesting, it's 100, I agree with everything you just said. And what's interesting about it too is Taylor has mastered a way to make you think like she knows you and you know her. So it is kind of building that authenticity and it is that personal connection. So when you're building your own brand, it's so interesting that your publicist was on you about Instagram followers because like Instagram's great and build followers wherever you can, but Instagram and it's funny too because your book came out a couple of years ago at this point, right? So even now it's a completely different ballgame. So when you're trying to build audiences and trying to build followings on things, the algorithms change, the platforms change, things come in and out, your demographics change, who your Swifties are, and can we say Brandies? Randi Braun. I don't know what the Randy Swifty thing would be. Where are they meeting could be different. And who knows, 3 years from now, there could be an entire new social media platform or an app or a different way that we communicate that can resonate. But it still doesn't change that authenticity of what you're clinical psychologist, friend said, it's just kind of building that and being authentic. I love that Taylor's a huge dork. Don't tell her I said that, but she embraces it. She danced at the awards shows. She kind of embraces that she's not the best dancer. She kind of, instead of trying to change that about herself, it makes it an endearing quality of her. Like, yes, she's super famous and has all the money in the world, but she'll still have a drink in the back of a nightclub with her parents on the day her husband wins or her boyfriend at the time wins the Super Bowl. Like, it's just kind of this awkwardness about her that I love so much.
Absolutely. And before we move off branding, because there's so much I want to cover, we got a question in the chat from Heather, which is, what is your advice on balancing confidence and approachability when shaping your brand? I think, Suzanne, this is something that Taylor Swift models so beautifully. And you just mentioned it before, right? She can sell out arenas, but she's unafraid to be like, yeah, like, I'm awkward. I sit in the back of the bar and have a drink with my parents because they're my people. I think she does balance, right? Like, this part of her confidence is that she's willing to be vulnerable. Part of her confidence is that she's willing to be herself, and she kind of creates a permission structure for other people. And so I feel like I have a perspective on this from a team leadership POV, but I'm curious if you have a perspective on this from like a pure branding POV.
Oh my goodness. I think confidence too comes in with who you surround yourself with, right? Taylor knows what her strengths and weaknesses are. And one of my points was, who are your Eras Tours dancers? Who, if you're, I think the question was about confidence, right? I can't see the chat. So I think if it was about confidence and building confidence.
It was about balancing confidence and approachability. Like, how do you balance those two things rather, Suzanne, when building your brand?
Yeah, surround yourself with good people. Building your team is incredibly important. Who are your Eras Tour dancers is what I say. She opened the film that accompanied the album release saying, I brought my team from the Eras Tour on this. So she knows kind of how to balance that, right? That approachability, that credibility. She knew how to play up on her strength and surrounding herself with people. So when you're trying to create your own brand or build kind of emphasizing or building out your authentic selves, who are your Eras Tour dancers? If Taylor Swift can turn back to choreographer Mandy Moore and, my personal favorite, Yav Ravnik, if and she can bring those people back to, because she trusts them. Her fans know who they are. They're going to set her up for success. So build your team and surround yourself with people that are going to build on your success. As I'm building my PR business here, I know how to do PR. I don't know how to do events. I know how to do all the things you said I know how to do. But the business side is where I don't know how to do any of those things. And it's not because I'm a failure. It's because you can't do everything. And what I loved about this whole experience with the movie too is it showed her taking pointers from people, because spoiler alert, Taylor Swift is not perfect and cannot do everything on her own. She has a team of people that help her. So when I saw her taking feedback from, it's like, wow, like she's asking and she's looking at this and saying like, oh, can we do this? Can we do this? And like really listening to the people that are around her. So I kind of got off topic from the question, but it's when you're
No, it's
trying to
okay.
balance that brand and like who, I know what I'm good at, but it took me a minute to understand that like, wow, I can't do all of this and I'm not good at everything. It's like when you're building a house and like you're trying to pick out paint color and like you're staring at like all the swatches at Lowe's and you're like, I don't know how to do this. And especially as women, we kind of feel like we're supposed to know how to do everything. And like you can't, like you can't. You can be good at things and you can dabble in stuff, but I am not an interior designer. I am not a choreographer. I'm not an accountant. I need to seek out help for places where I am not an expert in. And that's perfectly fine. Like I work with my friend who owns a candy company. He literally makes candy and he needed help for the holiday season. And I said, he's like, I just don't know how to do this. I'm like, because you know how to make candy. I don't know how to make candy, but I can help you figure out how to help people put their logo on candy boxes. That I'm good at. So together we're a great team.
100%. 100%. Oh my God, so many gems there, and a few things I want to add already, Heather. Okay, so in balancing confidence with approachability. Would love to hear from you in the chat. Just throw me a +1. Has anyone here read the book Likeable Badass by my friend Allison Fergallen? Anyone read the book Likeable Badass? I'm trying to see if mine is all the way up on the top shelf, so I'm not going to pull it down. Okay, Emily read it. Okay, this book, oh my gosh, Kim says she's starting it now. Oh, hi, Kim. Meredith says she's on the wait list from the library. Meredith, just come pick it up from my house. You can borrow my copy. It's signed, so you have to give it back to me. Okay, so Allison's a great friend of mine. If you follow Something Major, you might have even heard me do an event with Allison before or been in the room with us. Here's what Allison talks about. Allison's an organizational psychologist. No big deal. She kind of mentored Adam Grant. She's kind of a big deal. And her book is all about the research about how women can build status and power, and how we can be likable badasses, which is to be warm but competent. And what Allison says is that it's not about likability, it's about showing your competence and layering it with warmth. And one of the things I think Taylor Swift does really well, Heather, to answer your question about how I see it from a leadership coaching POV, is that she's humble without being self-deprecating. And Suzanne gave a great example of that, which I think is another one of Taylor Swift's great leadership lessons, which is Taylor Swift is not obsessed with remediating her weaknesses. Taylor Swift is obsessed with optimizing her strengths. I'm going to say that one more time. So I think it's one of the most important lessons from Taylor Swift, and I think it's on full force in this album. Taylor Swift is not obsessed with remediating her weaknesses. She is obsessed with optimizing her strengths. And Suzanne gave the example before. It's like, Taylor Swift is not a great dancer. And I'm not talking that to talk, you know what? I'm not saying that to be shady. It's not her superpower. When I think of people who are great dancers, where's my brain go to? Beyonce. What are you paying for at the Cowboy Carter tour? You are paying for singing and dancing that only Beyonce can provide. But Taylor Swift didn't pour her energy into trying to become as good of a dancer as Beyonce. She's poured her energy into her songwriting. And so I think there are some lessons here around know your strengths and lean into your superpowers. There is a strength around be humble without being self-deprecating. I wish every single woman on this call would stop saying sorry when you're late to the meeting. I wish you would stop saying sorry when you meant to say excuse me or hello or goodbye, right? So that's one other thing. And then the last thing that I would say about this too is I think that we think that it all is so existential, where it's building our brand or building how other people see us is really just a numbers game, right? Taylor Swift has written something like 300 songs, but only so many of them have ever gone to an album or become hits. And I think there's something really, really important to be said there. I have so many more thoughts on this. Suzanne, should we pivot to some thoughts about goal setting and teams? Where do you want to go in this conversation? I want to hear from you all in the Q&A. Where should we go, guys? I have so many things I want to talk to you about.
So, Randi, can you talk a little bit about, so it's been a wonderful week and everyone's loving the album and things are good. Taylor is not without her critics. There are definitely some haters, definitely some naysayers. The album wasn't even an hour old before people were, trashing it. And this isn't the greatest thing. And what is she doing? And, a lot of creators just kind of using the limelight, so to speak, to kind of get their thoughts out. And so talk a little bit about when you do have people criticizing what you think is your best work, or there's all you can do the best job ever, and there's always going to be someone who hates the way you ran the auction. How do you kind of combat that? And then also, if I would love to hear your thoughts on how do you not take it personally when something kind of bad happens and that's out of your control, especially when you've put a lot of work into something. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think that I know this is going to sound potentially weird. I think seeing the hate that Taylor Swift gets on the internet should be validating and freeing for every woman on this call. I think that you should feel validated and liberated by that, because I think it's a great example in the extreme about how oftentimes it's not about us. It's really not about us. And when I think about, okay, how does she handle that? She either ignores it, right? Or she write songs like, I don't know, like the entire Reputation album or like actually romantic. And she uses it as this fuel for her greatness. But when I think about how we can kind of take that, okay, don't let the haters, the jerks define me, right? Because there's just a straight line, right, Suzanne, from like the initial haters, the Kanye saga, right? More hate, more hate. And people just really love to hate. I think the idea of a successful woman is so threatening to so many people. Well, one of the things that I talk about in my book is I think that Taylor Swift does a really good job of kind of showing what I think of as like the three truths of feedback. Number one, feedback is not an immutable truth about who you are. Number two, feedback tells us so much about the feedback giver's preferences, priorities, values, and biases. So much more feedback about them often than it does about us. And number three, feedback is a subjective assessment about you and how someone is perceiving you in relation to a specific circumstance in a specific moment in time. And I think what Taylor Swift models in kind of walking this parallel between either not responding or when she responds, letting her work be the response is something that we could all adopt. I think sometimes there's a time to not respond. Like sometimes I get comments on my social media and I'm just like, this clearly like just isn't about me. Like I'll give you like an extreme example, but like I posted something a few months ago and someone literally just wrote Free Palestine on my account. And I'm just like, sir, like this is like this is just a commentary about like women and goal setting. Like this is, you want me to make a phone call? Like I don't know what you want me to do, right? Like that was not, when that person gave that feedback to me, that wasn't any kind of feedback on my work, right? Like that was clearly, when we talk about that person's preferences, priorities, values, biases, there's an issue that's important to them. And clearly they have a belief that me as an American Jew somehow has sway over geopolitical conflict 5,000 miles away from me, right? So I give that to you in the extreme. Or I could give you an extreme about, and you can feel free to say +1 in the chat or don't, but like how many of us have ever worked with like a toxic stakeholder at work? There are times where we've all had our own Kanye at work, right? Where someone, just no matter what we do, is always looking to cut us down. Like Taylor's not going to make Kanye not be Kanye. And so I think that what Taylor Swift models really well, and I want you all to think about how you can practice this, when you're getting negative feedback, number one, assess. Does this feel like true about me? Or what parts of it are true? If it's a data point, am I getting this data point a lot? Suzanne, one of the things I talk to my clients about all the time is like, if we were to plot every single piece of feedback you ever got on a trend line, right? Like on a data plot, like where would the trend line show you going? And are you making decisions and judgments about yourself based on what you see in the trend line or based on an outlier? Because I think we all know, if you've ever used data to do your job, the outliers are important. Like they tell a story, right? They often have important information. There's something to be curious about, but you would never make like $1 million decision at work based on the outlier versus the trend line. So like number one, what about this feedback is actually true? Number two is like, what requires a response and what can be unchanged about this person? And number three is, how can I let my work speak for itself? Now we have to storytell around our work. We have to brag on our work. We have to build our brand around our work. But I think the truth is, so many of us, I see this in my coaching practice all the time, have worked for our version of a Kanye, our version of the hater, our version of the person who is popping up the Instagram reel 5 minutes after her album drops because like they just know that the algorithm is going to be juiced for this content and is hoping to vacuum up followers. We've all had that equivalent. I want you to think about, where can you respond with your work and where do you not need to respond for? I've seen so many women just hemorrhage all their energy desperately seeking the approval of a toxic boss who's never going to give it to them. And I know, because I've been that girl. And I just think that that's something that's really, really transferable. What do you think? I mean, like sometimes you help your clients get through crises when it comes to hate.
Yeah, I think too, like it's controlling the narrative, right? And one of the best examples from the past week or so, Taylor has definitely gone on. She has all the access and can go to all the late night shows, and has really been working the circuit. And forgive me, I forget which interviewer did it, but someone made the comment of, "Oh well, this is your last album, right? Because like people are saying you're going to get married and have a baby, and like this is it." And instead of saying like, well, no, like what do you like, she said that, but then she did say that's incredibly offensive. I need to look up the proper quote if I'm going to use this moving forward, but like she said that's incredibly offensive because it was such an offensive way the person asked the question, and then like she just kept responding like, no, I make music, this is not my last album, like that, like then yes, I'm moving forward with my life in other ways, but no, like who like who said that, like why are you saying that? So she really shut down that line instantly. So instead of people kind of keeping the rumor going that this was her last album, she just kind of like stopped that line of questioning, or like stop that rumor mill right from the get-go. And there are other great examples about controlling the narrative. She righted a lot of wrongs and kind of shed some light on things in a very strategic way during all of these interviews on, like she didn't tell Ed Sheeran, her friend, about that she got engaged. She's like, he doesn't have a phone, like I didn't text him, like this wasn't like some slight on his part, because sometimes things can be made, and I see this with clients, I see this with myself, things can be made and like people make up stories in their head about what's happening, and it's like that's not what's happening at all. Like here's what's actually going on, and it's just controlling that narrative. So I think getting back to the question about branding, what is the story you're trying to tell? And it doesn't need to be the same story in perpetuity. We all grow, we all evolve, we all learn and change things and make mistakes and learn from them. But what is the narrative you're trying to create? Right now, she has a new album. She's happier than we've ever seen her. She's newly engaged and she's moving forward with her life. Those are the same points we're going to keep seeing as she talks about this album. And I'm very interested in a month or so what the next storyline of this is going to be. And when we were talking about teams, I mentioned her Mandy Moore, her choreographer, and her heirs to her dancers, but she's also got a publicist. None of this is on accident. This is all strategic. This isn't like she wakes up in the morning and is like, I'm going to go on Jimmy Fallon and just randomly tell stories today. Like all of this is planned to a level of, word choice. And
Would you
it's,
say she's a mastermind?
I would say she's
Would you say the
absolutely,
dominoes cascaded in the line
they
because she's a
did.
mastermind?
That is my favorite, my overall favorite Taylor Swift song, because she is the mastermind. And while the song is about love and a relationship, it's definitely, when that song came out, it was very like, oh yes, you are, Taylor, because she just knows how the game is played. And frankly, we
Totally.
all know how the game is played. It's just, are we playing it right? And do we have the right pieces on the board? And do we have the right people around us that can help us make those strategic moves? Taylor is
Yes.
a brilliant songwriter, and she can play guitar and she can play the piano. She is not her own publicist. She's not her own choreographer. She's not her own business manager. She doesn't fly her own plane. So, like, it's knowing where to ask for help to get those things across the finish line.
I love that, and I want to pick up that thread because as you were talking, we had a few things come into the chat. So first, Rachel said, "Dream job, publicist of Taylor Swift and keeper of the Easter eggs." Meredith put in the chat, "Has anyone asked Travis if he's going to quit the NFL?" In all caps, nope. We got another question anonymously, which is, to get our thoughts during what she calls a power pause on maintaining like her branding and her reputation, no pun intended, in the marketplace. I'm switching to a part-time director role to make room for balance with a young family, and I'm struggling with how to announce the shift on LinkedIn without seeming like I lack professional commitment. So, like, here's the thing I would say is like, why do you need to announce it on LinkedIn?
That's literally,
Right?
Randy, that's
Or
exactly what I was going to say. So we are connect.
yeah,
We don't need to make an announcement at all.
yeah. That's the thing is like I think that one of the things Taylor Swift models really well, and I think that there's a few pieces of this. So number one is she is an incredible sharer of information and storytelling, but one of the most underrated parts of storytelling, and hear me loud and clear when I say this, everyone, is about not oversharing. Okay. So Suzanne could tell you all the reasons why you don't want to overshare, but I will just tell you, even like when I wrote my book, my first draft, my manuscript was like 72,000 words. My final draft was 66,000. Like there are so many things that happen in the editing process that make your story stronger when you keep it tighter. So like number one would be like, what, like Taylor just, she's very buttoned up about what she chooses to share. So like my first question would be like, what's important about sharing this? Maybe it is important for you to share it. Maybe like you want to create a permission structure for another woman to do this. I think that's great. Don't go into like what I call oversharing mode. Sometimes I feel like in our desire to prove how committed we are, we end up like oversharing. It's like, so sorry that like I wasn't at the meeting. It's just like I had to take my kid to the pediatrician and I didn't realize that they were gonna have flu shot available. And then they had the flu shot, but then I promised them we'd get them a treat and they were freaking out when I dropped them off at daycare. It's like, no, it's just like, hey, thanks for waiting for me. I know I'm a few minutes late to the meeting. I was just getting back from a doctor's appointment. Catch me up. What did I miss? Right? Like you can get the same point across. That's number one. Like what's important about sharing. Number two, if and when you share, not oversharing. And thirdly, I think this is the most powerful leadership lesson, Suzanne, that I feel like has really gelled for me since I started doing this annual kind of webinar on leadership lessons from Taylor Swift, as we moved to like the Eras Tour and Tortured Poets department and Life of a Showgirl is like, I think Taylor like built a framework around this idea of living in eras. And I think it's something we all instinctually knew. But I think for me, I found it very powerful to use the eras framework, right? Like, and so I'd say to the person who's putting this post up, like, that's awesome. Like, you're in your like hardcore momming era. And like what your momming era is different than my momming era. And Suzanne doesn't have kids, so like she doesn't have a momming era, right? But all of our eras that we're all currently in are all completely valid. And I think back to on this album, if anyone's heard the song Wish List, I recognize maybe not every person who's listening to this is as fluent on the album. And I should say I'm not the Taylor Swift expert of the world. I just happen to think so highly of the way that she models a lot of leadership lessons that I believe we can bring to our lives as corporate showgirls. But if you listen to the lyrics, like that whole song is about how people's dreams are different and how what was on her wish list for such a long time was fame and then it was love. And now she thinks about her life with Travis Kelce, having kids. So I don't know what's on your wish list to the person who asked that question. Suzanne, I don't know what's on your wish list to the, almost 100 women who are here with us live today. I don't know what's on your wish list. But my greatest wish for you is that you get really honest with yourself. That's what I do as a coach with my clients, Suzanne, is help them get honest with themselves about what's on their wish list so that we can make it happen.
And I think to the person that asked the question about LinkedIn, just to hammer home again, you don't need to make an announcement. If you want to make an announcement, that's perfectly fine. But I think your question was about like lack of professional commitment. You have a commitment to yourself and to your family. That's important to you, and you're making to that decision. So own it. Like, who cares what other people think about your lack of professional commitment? It's one of these instances where no matter what you post, someone's going to have something to think about it. And if I've learned anything from Randi Braun, it's the fear of other people's opinions, right? It's that FOPO, copyright Randi Braun of, like, so what? Like, and I will be a little vulnerable, and like the amount of LinkedIn posts that I've had written and of just like, nope. And it's sometimes it's a little cathartic, just like getting it out there and like just typing the words. And it's like, nope, I don't need to post that. Like, I don't need to overshare that level, cut it down by 10 words. And, my LinkedIn, I do a PR tip of the day on LinkedIn a lot. And I always say, if you hit, return or you make a new paragraph in a LinkedIn post, that's another post. You don't need to make your LinkedIn post 15 paragraphs long, like make it a series, because that gives me a little shield that I have not like just word vomited into a LinkedIn post. But you're not oversharing. Like, people look to LinkedIn for a lot of different reasons, but you don't need to go into a 15 page, why your family is important to you and you made this decision and all that. You don't need to do that, especially because you've expressed some hesitation on it. So you don't need to do it right now. Like, maybe after a couple of weeks when you've thought about it a little bit more, or you've talked to other people and you've thought through what is it that you want to say, you'll have a little bit better understanding. But there is no law anywhere that when you change a job or make a career shift that you must inform LinkedIn within 24 hours or LinkedIn will explode. It doesn't work that way. I've had multiple jobs this year that have been fits and starts, and they're not on LinkedIn because they were contracts, and like no one needs to know about them. I'll figure something out later because I don't owe anybody on LinkedIn anything. So
I love that you say that. This is something I think about a lot, especially like in a very fraught environment that we're in, where there's always an opportunity to like pop off and give a hot take. Like there's a lot of things that I don't write about. There's a lot of things that I don't comment about. And part of that is because like I might be having conversations that are meaningful about them, but they're like with specific people or they're in specific rooms. And I don't feel a responsibility to communicate my feelings on every single thing. Now, those of you who follow me know I have a lot of feelings, and I do put many of them on LinkedIn. But the other thing I would say is this comes up all the time. People sometimes feel like intimidated on building their brand on LinkedIn. I will just remind you this before I pop to Leah's question, and we welcome more questions. Please send us more questions. I'm obsessed with all your questions. Is like sometimes when I'm feeling nervous about putting something on LinkedIn, I try to remember that like most of the people who are going to read this are like not sitting there with like a notebook being like, what did Randi Braun say today? They're doing things that should honestly be horrifying to us. They're checking their phone, sitting in a red light at traffic. You should not be doing that. They are tuned into a meeting and scrolling at the same time. I mean, I think about how many people engage in my content from the bathroom, Suzanne. Like when I'm sometimes feeling nervous to hit send on something, I'm like, yeah, I just have to remember that like someone's gonna be reading this while they're like putting on mascara or like maybe doing another activity. You know what I mean? So it's just like sometimes, what I love about Taylor Swift, I think she models this so beautifully, is like sometimes there's just time to be a mastermind, and sometimes it's just not that deep. Like, I think that's why so many of us, I know it's why I feel so drawn to her. It's like sometimes she's a mastermind, but if we had to be the mastermind version of ourselves all the time, it'd be exhausting. I think that she also does a great job of modeling that, like, sometimes there's just a reverence. And one of the things I love that she does is like she plays with ideas before they're public. Like, and that's where I think one of the best ways to use LinkedIn is when you're ideating on something. Like, I can't even tell you this idea of FOPO, fear of other people's opinions. It's something I've been talking about for a while. It was an off the cuff thing that I posted on LinkedIn like 2 years ago. And now it's something that I've written about in Forbes. It's like very central to the book proposal I have out right now. It's like these ideas grow. And when I think about the link between like the Eras tour and this album, right? Like in her whole Midnight section, we get a little preview of Life of a Showgirl. Is there a way to read that that's like a classic Taylor Swift Easter egg? Sure, of course. But is there also a way to read that as like, hey, this was an idea she had and she was probably like playing around with it and tweaking it? To me, that's something that really inspires me. And when I think about being a corporate showgirl, right, is that like every performance is a little bit different. And you build and you iterate on those performances. And Suzanne, I'm going to take it to Leah's question, which she said, do you have any thoughts or advice for any of us furloughed showgirls? I actually do want to take a moment to just acknowledge, especially I know we have some people here in the DC region, like I know Suzanne's here with me in the DC region, like it's really hard to explain how life stopping the shutdown has been for a lot of people in our community. One of my neighbors who doesn't even work for the federal government just had to close her business because it's affecting her small business from her customer base so much. It's devastating. And so Leah, for any of my furloughed showgirls, what advice do I have? Where my brain went, Leah, when you asked the question was, I think about something that Taylor says throughout this whole album without actually saying it, which is that like we all kind of just see the sparkle and the sequence, right? That's kind of like the essence of this whole album is like we all see the sparkle and the sequence, but we don't see like all the stitches that hold it together. And I'm a huge believer in just like showing up and being intentional every single day. I think one thing Taylor Swift always does really well is like she just always like knows what her options are and she's always ready to exercise her options. Whether it is owning her masters, whether it is changing her costumes in terms of just the colors, so keeping the costume on the Eras tour. And so I would say to you is like, what are the small tweaks that you're making to the performance so that like you feel like you're equipped to stand on your own center stage under your own spotlight? Suzanne, I want to have room to take more questions. Any kind of like lightning round level thoughts on that?
So, well, I, concur with just heart goes out to all of, and the federal government is not just in DC, obviously, there are people all across the country and even
Totally.
internationally when the government is shut down that it affects a lot of, families. And I think, not only just about the furloughed people, but just people that are in kind of their transition era or like figuring out next steps era. We haven't talked about money a lot in this conversation, and I think it's important for women to talk about money. We work for money, and with furlough girlies or people that are figuring out next steps, it's kind of like hard to admit sometimes. It's not just the professional setback or like what am I going to do? It's like how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to do this? And there's kind of this undercurrent, I think, that when you are a professional showgirl, and I don't mean it in the showgirl aspect, but when we are
A
in this
corporate showgirl, yes.
this corporate showgirl era, that we just kind of have this like slush fund of savings just like hanging out, and everyone's got different financial situations and scenarios, but at the end of the day, like we do this corporate showgirl job because we want to get paid to live our lives. So when that's abruptly taken away from you, whether by choice or by circumstances, it can be a little jarring, because not only are you trying to figure out what your next professional steps are, you're also now have the financial burden on top of that. And in a lot of conversations about your next steps, or what your future is going to look like, or what's your professional strategy, kind of that financial aspect gets let go a lot, or not talked about. And it's okay to kind of say like, yes, I want to be the girl boss, and I want to open my own business, and I want to do all these things and have this entrepreneurial mindset. But I also want to be able to afford Amazon Prime and like, go to the dry cleaner and go to the movies every so often, because that's kind of the life I was living. So I just want to like acknowledge to those on this call that are in transition, or, that paycheck is prohibiting them from taking that leap because they need to kind of get things in order, or leaving that W-2 job is just challenging. I see you, I know how that feels, and it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable and say like, yeah, I work for money. I work for joy. I work because I'm good at my job, but like, we need money. Like money's good. So, money makes the world go round, and I want my piece of the pie here. So the furloughed folks, like, it's okay to be a little freaked out about like, what are you going to do? Because so much is uncertain and also kind of out of your hands. One last thing, Rennie, I know we're almost at time. Can you talk to me quickly about just from a leadership perspective, and when clients come to you and you're kind of sitting down to start a coaching process with them, what are some questions you make them ask yourself that you think Taylor Swift would kind of ask herself to kind of start that coaching process?
Yeah, I think like what's important to you? Why is it important to you? And who is the squad that is around you? And I think that like that all comes back to everything that we've talked about, right? Which is like a lot of times I hear women come to me and they want a new job, or they want to start their own business, or they want to level up their brand. So it's like, what is important to you? Why is it important to you? And often the way I ask the question is like, if your life was a movie, who would be the cast of characters in it? Like that's one of the first questions I ask when I'm in a coaching session, right? Like, because like think about like Taylor Swift, like, right? I don't know if you saw a clip from the New Heights episode, Travis Kelce's episode of his podcast with his brother that came out. But his brother is hilariously interviewing him about the song Wood. And he's like, I'm honored every time that girl writes a song about me. I love her. And I think that, whether you're furloughed and you're freaking out, and I don't say that in like a negative way, like I've been in a house where someone's laid off, and it's a scary moment. I'm not saying a furlough is a layoff, God forbid, but like who are the people around you who are supporting you? And I think like one of the things Taylor Swift models that we can all take away is that like our goals have to be a team sport. Like Leah, like as a furloughed corporate showgirl, like you do not have to get through this alone. Like I want you to think about how you can lean on your community. I want you to think about how you can lean on your friends. Those of you who are going through anything in life, whether you are feel like you're quote unquote downshifting in your career to spend more time with your family, or you're leveling up because you feel like you're at the apex of what you're doing. I think one of the things Taylor Swift models so beautifully is that what we do is really a team sport. To that end, Suzanne, I want to thank you so much for being on my team today and share a few ways for us to all stay connected. So for those of you who are looking, oops, I still have the the music on. All right, let me pause that for a second. Let me fix that. So for those of you who are looking for more connection, one thing that I would share is that starting on November 3rd, I'm running something called the New Playbook Experience. It takes my book and turns it into a 20-week coaching experience. If you are looking to be in community with other women and think about things like cracking the confidence code, owning your message at work, really reimagining what your goals are, please feel free to join us. I'm happy to answer questions. Feel free to shoot me an email if you want to talk more, or just keep hanging out with me on social media. I always love, building up my Instagram account for my publicist, or hanging out with you on LinkedIn. And Suzanne, while we hear from you how people can stay in touch, we would love to hear from those who are in the chat. What's one thing you're taking away from today? So Suzanne, one big takeaway from you from today, how can people stay in touch with you?
So I just posted in the chat my LinkedIn. As I mentioned before, I post not daily, but I do a PR tip of the day. So if you're looking for kind of just different ways to do public relations is a very broad category. There's a lot of things involved in that, but I look at how to get into the media, how to plan a good event. One thing we didn't get too deep today, but how to really take content and repurpose it for a lot of reasons. Which is something I specialize in, and also how to make the colors match. And I mean that figuratively, as in like the orange and teal of the life of a showgirl era too, but also how to really take your brand and elevate it, and how to make it kind of just populate it. So when people see things, they always know it's about you and your company.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for coming. Cannot wait to see you guys next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Randy. Thanks, Randy.